So the next Diablo 4 expansion, Lord of Hatred, is bringing with it a ton of new additions and pretty massive overhauls to fundamental aspects of the game. One of the biggest of these overhauls, and I think what's going to be the most impactful, is an overhauled endgame, which is actually how they describe it. The biggest thing and the main thing I want to go over in this video is a new addition that will kind of bring all of the endgame together called Warplanes. And this is essentially an endgame meta progression system that will tie in every endgame system and allow you to modify and change the rewards, the difficulty, and kind of choose your path throughout all of the different endgame activities. And there's even a lot more added to this, one of which is something that is absolutely massive that I don't think a lot of people actually know is a part of this system. So if you go to the official Diablo 4 website and go under expansions, there's the Lord of Hatred expansion. You can scroll down and there's a section called Endgame. And I wanted to give the description they give here very specifically because they leave one thing out of this that they tell you about in the article they posted about the expansion that is not detailed here. So once the campaign ends, your journey is just beginning. Lord of Hatred brings new ways to engage with Diablo 4's endgame, combining new activities and major system updates designed around choice, mastery, and high-stakes rewards. Craft war plans to create your own endgame progression, advance through selections of your favorite activities, and apply a range of modifiers to earn coveted rewards. So what this is explaining here is this new war plans system that it sounds like you're going to be crafting, and I'm not sure if they mean like you're physically going to a crafter and like crafting an item that you then make a war plan out of, or if it's just kind of trying to say that you as a player is just kind of crafting your path throughout the endgame activities. These war plans are going to be how you partake in a majority of the endgame now, where you can essentially combine all of these different activities into a war plan, choose the rewards, and apply different modifiers to increase the rewards, but make it much more difficult. Realistically, it's a big endgame meta progression system, which is something that I think a lot of people, including myself, have wanted for the endgame for quite a long time, and it's kind of a first in the Diablo franchise. A lot of other more modern ARPGs are also having meta progression, both PoE 1, PoE 2, Last Epoch has it. A lot of the other current ARPGs we have right now have something like this, so it is super cool that we are now getting this in Diablo 4 to shore up the endgame pretty massively. But like I mentioned, there was actually some omitted information that if you go to the news section of the Diablo 4 website and go to the blog post about the expansion, they give us another piece of information that's probably one of the biggest pieces of the war plans system. So war plans is described like this in the article. Create war plans to tailor your own endgame progression. Advance your selections of your favorite activities and apply a range of modifiers to earn coveted rewards. Very similar to what we just read. But then it says war plans also adds skill trees for all endgame activities, providing more breadth and a variety of challenges to enhance your progression through the endgame. So like we just went over, under the expansion section, under the section that talks about war plans, it doesn't mention skill trees at all, but in the blog post, it mentions that war plans also adds skill trees for all endgame activities. So this will probably be something like we see in other ARPGs, more specifically something like PoE that has skill trees for every endgame piece of content as well. We will probably partake in that endgame system, and in some way you'll get skill points that then you put into the skill trees that will either increase general loot, but more than likely will primarily be focused on choosing the different types of loot you want from that activity and probably dropping more specific things. Like maybe you want Hell Tides to actually be the place you go farm Obdicite, so maybe that's where you go in the skill tree, and maybe you can even increase like the mythic drop rate if you get to like the final point of the skill tree for Hell Tides or something like that. But this would mean there would be skill trees for Hell Tides, Nightmare Dungeons, the boss ladder, maybe even for every boss, but I'm assuming it's just the boss ladder in general, the pit, potentially the tower, but the tower isn't really reward structured, so maybe not not the tower specifically. And then we will also have the new piece of endgame content coming with the expansion called Echoing Hatred, which is essentially this horde mode where it's just constant waves of demons and it gets harder and harder with every new wave. That should also have its own endgame skill tree for war plans. Now, we did also get a little bit of additional information actually earlier in the year when a survey was leaked going over new things we could potentially see in the future of Diablo 4. And after we got the expansion announcement, a lot of the expansion was actually in this. And some of these things are just directly explaining what is coming with the expansion. And we got one section that seems to be on war plans, and it's called Activity Playlist and Reward Selection. Allows players to have more control over the types of rewards they receive by selecting specific activity and reward pairings. Players can build their activity playlist. Again, building your activity playlist is pretty much exactly what war plans are, and earn valuable rewards from various activities across Sanctuary, such as obtaining masterworking materials from Helltide or crafting materials / gold from Nightmare Dungeons. With this feature, you can decide which activities you engage with in order to get the resources needed to progress, giving more agency in how you play. This also helps provide guidance on how to maximize your fun and efficiency post-campaign. Now, this doesn't say anything about like increasing difficulty or anything, but the war plans we are actually getting definitely are being more described as something that you can also bump up the difficulty a lot. But this gives us a little bit more information and seems to be just describing war plans. And I do like that it is kind of describing that you can just choose what activities kind of drop certain loot. And I'm assuming that portion is actually going to be what's in the skill trees, like I mentioned. So do you want masterworking materials to come from Helltide? So do you want to go farm your opticite only in Helltide? You could probably go up through the skill tree and do that. So if you're someone that really just say likes Helltide, you could just do a lot of Helltide, get a bunch of points through your skill tree, and just kind of boost up and change the loot you're getting from that Helltide, which will realistically just allow you to choose the endgame content you want to do more than others and absolutely juice up the content, because war plans are not only going to have these skill trees that probably will allow you to juice up more loot and also kind of choose what loot you're getting, but these war plans are also sounding like you're choosing what type of loot you're getting from it, and you're also just able to add these different modifiers to increase difficulty and probably increase loot. We also got a little bit of footage from this from a small gameplay trailer of the expansion. And in this trailer, we get to see the actual physical table we go to craft our war plans. And it's this physical table with kind of these 3D icons of all of the different endgame activities you can partake in. And then it seems you kind of chart your war plan throughout all these different activities. And it seems you're also in some way choosing the rewards from them. Now, we don't exactly know how that's going to work. It sounds like we may actually be crafting these. And then maybe depending on what role you get on the war plan, you get to kind of see different rewards for all the different content in that specific war plan. So it may be something like that, but we do get to see this character chooses 5 different activities on their war plans. First thing they choose is Infernal Hordes. It has just a little loot symbol next to it, so maybe generic loot. Then they choose Nightmare Dungeons, which have a jewelry icon next to it, specifically rings. So maybe those Nightmare Dungeons are like only dropping rings or mainly dropping rings. Then they have Helltides, which has a jewelry symbol, so either fragments or full gems. And then they choose Whispers, which has a goblin icon next to it, which is also very interesting. I'm not sure how that's actually going to work. Maybe those Whispers give you a cache that give you like Treasure Breach Nightmare Sigils, or maybe every time you complete a Whisper, a goblin spawns or something like that. There's tons of stuff that could be. Then they have layer bosses, and it does just say layer boss, and I don't think there's like a specific icon to show us which one it is. So maybe it's a specific one, or maybe it's a random one. And I don't know the icon next to this. I can't really tell what it is, but there's another specific loot icon next to that, which could also be something different, because normally you do layer bosses kind of primarily for uniques, and this seems to be a different symbol. So it seems that pretty much all the endgame activities will be able to be focused for different loot than they specifically drop right now. And that's pretty much all of the information we have on war plans so far, but I think this is going to be the biggest and most impactful change to Diablo 4 we've seen so far. Just repackaging the entirety of the endgame in this new war plan system that has skill trees for every piece of endgame content that just allows you to juice up kind of like mapping or other things in Path of Exile, where you can just juice up the loot, but also just add tons of difficulty modifiers, and if you want more more and better loot. It'll make the content much more difficult. So now hopefully pretty much every piece of endgame content can be incredibly difficult and something you could test your build against instead of only having the pit. We're going to have more pieces of endgame content coming with the expansion. So not only just everything we have right now, all of the pieces of endgame content, which will all essentially be much more endgame than they've ever been before, but then we're also going to have new endgame content added in. So the endgame's going to be heavily fleshed out and significantly better going into the expansion. But then we'll also have things like the new seasonal content. If I would have to wager a guess, every new season after the expansion, and probably the one with the expansion, is probably going to have a piece of content that is in the Warplane system. For the current season we're in, obviously those are kind of changes to the existing systems, but I could also see if Warplanes was already implemented and we got the season we're in now, that going and doing the seasonal Asmodean fight where you open up the 3 chests, I could very much see that being put into the Warplanes and something with its own skill tree. I could very much see any time they add something to the Warplanes, whether it's seasonal or permanent, that also gets its own skill tree. So maybe the rifts from the previous season that pretty much everybody loved, maybe those would be added to the Warplanes as well and have their own skill tree. So there is just so much they can do with the Warplane system that I just think this is one of the biggest and most fundamental changes to the endgame and to Diablo 4 as a whole. And I think this is just going to be so massive for the game's health in general. It's going to give pretty much everybody a lot more playtime every season, no matter how hardcore of a player you are. You can choose the content you're doing. You can choose the loot or try to choose the loot from the different endgame activities. You can make it much more difficult with much more loot or less difficult. So there's just going to be so much cool stuff they can do with these Warplanes. And this might be the thing I am most excited for going into the next expansion. But that's all I want to go over. So thanks for watching.